Okay, in this video I'm going to introduce you to the concept of objects. So far we've looked at all the different decision logics, looping structures, processing, that type of stuff. So what an object is this an actual kind of a model, if you will, of something in the real world. Typically something in the real world, I guess. It doesn't always have to be. But for the sake of this demo, we're going to model some real world stuff. So one thing that you cannot model, let's say, it's very difficult to create an object to represent a human because humans are very complex. But what I'm going to do instead is we're going to create an object, say, to model somebody's postal address. And that's a good candidate for a C# object because a postal address is data related. It's an address. You can also, create an object like if you're doing a website, somebody's account or online profile, all their information. You can create a user object that has all that data in it. Now, why use objects? Because if you just have collections of variables, it gets a little messy and it becomes very difficult to hand off groups of variables to other areas of a program and have that program actually really kind of understand their relationship, right? So, for example, I'm going to model an address without an object first. So we're going to have a group of variables. So we're going to say string address 1, address 2, city, state, and zip code. Okay, and in builds it gives us warnings. Hey, we've created these variables, but we're not using them. So we're going to use them now. So we're going to say console. Alright. Address 1. Kind of hard to make this look nice and neat. I'll say console. Or sorry, come on. We'll say address 1 equals console.readline. And then we'll copy and paste this. And now we'll say address 2. And change this to address 2. This becomes city. So as you can see, I mean, we've got 5 variables. They're all completely independent of each other. They're not glued together by any means. They're all separate chunks of data. And zip code. So getting all this data from the user, say address 1, 123 Fake Street. Address 2 is blank. City, we'll call this my town. State, my state. Zip code 11111. Okay. So now you press enter. So in the program now we have 5 variables. We have address 1, address 2, city, state, and zip code. Now notice something in state here. Notice how I had backspaced as I was typing, but it still captured the M. And this is what I'm talking about in other videos where I say that human input is very unreliable because depending on what systems you are, although I backspaced, let me actually just double check. Yeah, see? I actually backspaced, but in this particular runtime it doesn't capture the backspace and it did not correct my input. So this is why getting human input is very unreliable. You always have to be very careful when you expose the runtime to human input. But now we've got 5 addresses floating around. If we ever wanted to do anything with that, we would have to accommodate 5 variables. So what do I mean by anything you want to do? Let's say, for instance, if we just want to reprint somebody's address. Let me actually put name. So we'll work with a name here. We'll say, what is your name? And make this name. So let's say now, just to give you an idea of how difficult it is to work with 6 variables, I'm going to introduce you to what's called a method. So notice this whole construct here where it says public static void main. This is a method. It's called a method. It's a logical unit of processing. Now, the computer, whenever you go to run this program, it always looks for a main class that has a static method called main. So that's how it always knows how to start there. You can have more than one method. You can have public static, and I'm going to call this string. So what this word does is public means that anywhere else in your program can access this. Static is it's complicated. I'll go into that in another video, but for now, in a console app, all this stuff has to say static. But this right here tells you what kind of data you're going to get back. So whenever the program comes across what we're about to do, it's going to know that it's getting a string value back. So we're going to call this public static string get formatted address. Okay. So now the idea of this is going to be, we have all these variables, but we're going to want to hand it off to another part of the program and give us back a nice formatted string, right? So let's say, for instance, if we wanted to take in somebody's address information and then format it all nice and pretty to be printed onto an envelope. I'll just use that example. So we are going to do that in this construct here, public static string get formatted address. And now everything that we put in here, we're going to be formatting the address. Now, here is the problem. If you notice, in our main method, we're declaring our variables here. These variables, you cannot reach them from this method, and that's because of something called variable scope. If you notice how all of our curly braces are indented, this is called scope. So anything that's declared and created within that scope is not accessible to anything that is in the surrounding scope. So these are called code blocks, and each code block has a specific scope. So within the scope of main, these variables exist. When you step outside the scope of main, let me just shrink that. So here's main. Anything outside of main, you cannot access address 1. So if I looked for address 1, notice it doesn't find it. Well, spelling notwithstanding. If I come down here and I try to find address 1, again, it doesn't autocomplete. But if I'm in main, it will find it because it is declared there in main. So again, I can just come out here, and if I type address 1, now see it sees address 1 and address 2 because I am within the scope of main, and I'm within the scope of where these variables are declared. So this becomes a problem. How do you pass values between different parts of the programs? Well, there's several ways of doing it. First and foremost, probably the most straightforward way of doing it is to increase the scope of these variables. What do I mean by increase the scope? I mean move them out where you can reach them from other parts of the program. So if we get it here and put it up here in the main class, now I can still access them here, and I can also access them down here. Actually, I think I need to do a build before it'll find it. Let's see. Oh, these have to be static. Okay, so this problem, because it does not return a string, I'll go into what this means later. Right now I just want it to build. Okay, so now it likes it and just gives us a warning saying it's assigned but never used. It's used in here, but why is it saying that it's not used? Because it's not used within this scope. It's used within this scope, the smaller scope. But that's okay. So now if you look, we can get name here, right? So when main executes, it's going to assign whatever you type here. So whenever the user enters their name, it's going to get stored up here. Then we can reach it down here. Now keep in mind, I'm showing you this, and this is not the ideal way of doing things. I just want to point that out, but at the same time, I want to teach you about variable scope and how scope works in C#. So eventually, I'm going to show you the right way of doing this. So please do not watch this video and charge forward thinking this is the right way to do it, because I will slap you in your face gently. Okay, never mind that. So let me show you what happens when you make a call to get formatted address. So to make this code here execute, you have to quote-unquote call it, and that just means putting its name somewhere else. So now whenever we execute main, we're going to get all of our data. It will make this call, and then it will execute any code here. So let me show you how that works. What is your name? Billy. Address is 123 Fake Street. No address 2. My city. My state. Okay. Now if you look, we have all of our values, and now it gets to this line where we're calling get formatted address. And what that does, if you watch, the execution skips down here, and it says return in our quotes in semicolon. Please remain patient. I'll explain what that does. And then it exits and comes back. So when you put the name of this method into the executing method, it gets that name. It's going to come down here and it's going to execute whatever is in that method. And that's called a method call. C-A-L-L, like you call your mama. Okay? So, but we named this get formatted address because we're actually going to want to return a formatted string that looks all nice and pretty. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to say console write line, or just say console write get formatted address. Okay, so now whatever we put in here, we're going to say formatted address. And you can imagine what this is going to do. This is going to call get formatted address, and it's going to return this string back up here to the calling code, and it's going to replace this value get formatted address with formatted address, and then it's going to write it out to the console. So what is your name? Bob 123 Fake Street. City is my city. State is my state. Now it comes here. We'll run. And see, notice what happened. It called get formatted address. It returned formatted address, and that's what it wrote to. That's what it wrote to the console. Now, I don't know what happened. Why all of a sudden these became write statements. Or sorry, no. I'm terribly sorry there. They never were write line statements. So we'll say Bob, address 123 Fake Street. There we go. So I don't know why the formatting was off earlier. It may just be a little fluke. or perhaps I pressed the wrong button. I don't know why that happened. We'll just pretend it didn't. So put my state in the city, and of course then you have to put my city in the state, because it totally makes sense. And now watch what happens. When it calls get formatted address, it gets the text formatted address, and then returns back up here. But we don't want to return formatted address. We want to return all of these data values formatted as the address. So we can use our format object, string.format. Okay. So now this is going to look weird because we all know how an address looks. An address looks like this. It says, Jonathan Hart, 123 Fake Street, my city, my state, and your zip code, right? Now this gets into the problem, and I showed in a previous video how to handle putting new lines, or return characters rather, into a string, because you can't enter on this, so you can't say name and go down. It doesn't let you do that. So to specify that the output should skip a line, there's some escape sequences. Now string format, and there's another video on this, but this string here, it works by allowing you to insert data values into a formatted string. So what that means is if I wanted to say, and this is just an example, my name is, this curly brace with a 0 in it, this is a placeholder. That means that we're going to give it a data value, and it's going to replace this with whatever that value is. So if I came here and I said name, then what this is going to do is it's going to take the value, whatever you type in name, and replace this curly brace 0 with name. So we're going to run that now, and we'll see that. What is your name? Billy. Address is 123 Billy Avenue. No address to, and then city, my city. State is my state. Zip code. Alright. So now, when we get the formatted address, it says my name is Billy. Notice how it replaced this curly brace 0 with the name Billy. And you can have more than one placeholder. So now this is how we're going to format the address. We're going to create a format object that takes the name, address 1, address 2, city, state, and zip code. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 variables. We're going to need a format object that has 6 placeholders. So we start with the first placeholder, that's going to be our name, and then the way that you make it do a new line in the console is with this /n. And so now this becomes address 1. Go down to another line, and that's address 2. And you go down to a new line again, and now you're going to do the city. City is followed by a comma and a space. And now you do the state, another space, and the zip code. Now notice that we've got 6 placeholders starting from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 means there's 6 placeholders. And this looks weird because this is actually wrapping to the new line every time. But because we are in the C# environment, it issues this to the console. The console reads that and makes sense of it. So, wow, all that's a mouthful. So once again, we'll say my name is Billy, 123 Fake Street, no address to, and so then city is my city, state is my state. You may be wondering why sometimes it doesn't pick up a character. I'm wondering that too. I can't explain it. I'm not losing any sleep over it. It apparently still works. So now notice it printed off. And because address 2 is blank. It's got a blank line there. My city, my state. It's nice and formatted, right? So, yeah. In the next video, we'll look at how to actually make an object to represent this address.